You don't need to do anything. Just listen and let go. Again, Arjun's fingers tightened around the reins. His chariot had stopped right in the middle of the battlefield, but the war around him seemed frozen. Krishna turned slightly, his dark eyes steady. He didn't answer right away. The dust hadn't even settled from the last exchange. You keep asking the same thing, Krishna said. His voice was calm, like he was discussing the weather. Arjun exhaled sharply. He could hear his own heartbeat louder than the distant clatter of armor. The horses stamped impatiently, but neither of them moved. Krishna's silence stretched longer this time. You think I don't understand, Arjun said. His voice cracked on the last word. He cleared his throat and tried again. But I do. I just. Krishna held up a hand. His palm faced outward, fingers relaxed. Tell me what you think I'm saying. Arjun's grip on the reins loosened slightly. He looked down at his own knees. The leather straps creaked as he shifted his weight. Somewhere behind them, a soldier coughed. The sound carried further than it should have in the unnatural stillness. I think you're saying I already know the answer, Arjun said. His fingers tapped twice against his thigh. That I'm just afraid to act on it. Krishna nodded once. He lowered his hand slowly, letting it rest on his knee. The fabric of his dhoti wrinkled under his fingers. Arjun swallowed. His throat felt dry. But what if I'm wrong? The horses snorted in unison. Krishna tilted his head slightly, studying Arjun's face. Then we wouldn't be having this conversation. Arjun blinked. His fingers twitched toward his bow, then stilled. You make it sound simple. It is. Krishna shifted his weight, making the chariot boards groan. You're the one making it complicated. Arjun opened his mouth, then closed it. The distant sound of metal on metal drifted from the front lines. Neither of them turned to look. Krishna leaned forward slightly. His fingers drummed once on his knee. Say it. Arjun's shoulders slumped. He rubbed his face with one hand. I don't know how to start. Krishna exhaled through his nose. His fingers stilled. From where you are now, that's always how. Arjun's hand dropped to his lap. He stared at it for a moment before speaking again. I keep seeing their faces. Krishna didn't move. He watched Arjun's fingers curl into a loose fist. Which ones? The ones I haven't killed yet. Arjun's voice dropped lower. And the ones I have. Krishna nodded slowly. He waited until Arjun looked up again before speaking. You're not seeing them. You're seeing what you think about them. Arjun's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it without speaking. Krishna didn't blink. He leaned back slightly against the chariot rail. You think they're judging you. A muscle twitched in Arjun's neck. He looked away, toward the empty stretch of dirt between their chariot and the waiting armies. Krishna watched him for 3 breaths before speaking again. They're not. Arjun's fingers dug into his own thigh. His shoulders rose with each rapid breath. How do you know? Krishna didn't answer immediately. He watched Arjun's hands shake before speaking. Because they're thinking the same thing you are. Arjun's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto Krishna's face. That's impossible. Krishna shrugged one shoulder. You're all afraid, just differently. Arjun opened his mouth, but Krishna continued. And none of them are looking at you right now. The reins slipped from Arjun's fingers entirely. They landed across his thighs with a soft thud. They're not. Krishna shook his head once. They're looking at their own hands, their own knees, their own doubts. Arjun breathed out slowly through his nose. The sound of distant shouting reached them, muffled and indistinct. He didn't turn toward it. Krishna watched him. So look at me instead. Arjun blinked. His breath slowed. He focused on Krishna's eyes, dark and steady. You're not alone, Krishna said. His voice was quiet, but clear over the distant noise. Not in this. Arjun swallowed. His hands unclenched slowly, fingers stiff from gripping too tight. Krishna didn't look away. Now ask me what you really want to ask. Arjun's fingers flexed against his thighs. He swallowed again before speaking. What if I can't do it? Krishna leaned forward, just enough to make the chariot creak. Then you won't. Arjun's breath hitched. He pressed his palms flat against his knees. And what happens then? Krishna tilted his head slightly. Then you'll still be here, talking to me. Arjun's fingers twitched. He stared at the reins pooled in his lap. But the war. You'll fight when you're ready, Krishna said. His voice didn't rise or fall. Arjun exhaled through his nose. His shoulders stayed tense. What if I'm never ready? Krishna didn't blink. He studied Arjun's face for a long moment. Then you won't fight. Arjun's fingers curled into fists again. They'll call me a coward. Krishna shook his head once. No, they'll call you nothing, because they won't know what to call you. Arjun let out a slow breath through his teeth. His knuckles whitened around the reins, still draped over his lap. That's worse. Krishna tilted his chin slightly. Only if you think it is. Arjun's shoulders hunched forward. He stared at the space between his knees. I don't know how to stop thinking it. Krishna reached over and placed 2 fingers on Arjun's wrist. Then don't stop. Just notice you're thinking it. Arjun looked down at Krishna's fingers, resting lightly against his pulse point. His skin felt warm under the touch. Krishna waited until Arjun's breathing slowed before speaking again. Thoughts keep moving when you let them. Arjun swallowed hard. He watched his own thumb twitch against his thigh. Even the bad ones. Krishna's fingers tapped once against Arjun's wrist. Especially those. Arjun exhaled sharply. His thumb stopped twitching. They don't feel like they're moving. They are. Krishna didn't lift his fingers. You're just holding on to them. Arjun flexed his free hand against his thigh. How do I let go? Krishna tilted his head slightly. You already know. Arjun swallowed. His fingers twitched again under Krishna's touch. What if I forget? Krishna didn't blink. Then you'll remember. Arjun's fingers tensed against his wrist. How? Krishna exhaled through his nose. His fingers didn't move. The same way you did now. Arjun's shoulders relaxed slightly. He looked at Krishna's hand, still resting on his wrist. By asking you, Krishna nodded once. His thumb brushed against Arjun's pulse point. By noticing, Arjun exhaled slowly. His fingers relaxed slightly under Krishna's touch. That's all. It's enough. Krishna didn't move his hand away. Try it. Arjun closed his eyes for a moment. His shoulders dropped another inch. It's quieter now. Krishna's fingers stayed where they were. Notice that too. Arjun opened his eyes and looked at Krishna's hand on his wrist. What if I notice too much? Krishna didn't move. His thumb stayed against Arjun's pulse. Then notice that. Arjun exhaled through his nose. His fingers uncurled slightly. It's not going away. Krishna shook his head once. It doesn't have to. Arjun exhaled through his mouth. His fingers loosened further against his thighs. So I just keep noticing. Krishna's thumb pressed slightly against Arjun's pulse point. Until you don't have to. Arjun swallowed. The reins slipped further down his lap. That feels too easy. Krishna didn't move his hand. Easy isn't the same as simple. Arjun exhaled through his nose. His fingers twitched once against his thigh, but didn't tighten again. Then, why does it feel wrong? Krishna's thumb still rested against Arjun's pulse. Because you expect it to feel a certain way. Arjun swallowed. His shoulders stayed loose, but his breath hitched once before evening out. What if I can't stop expecting? Krishna's fingers didn't shift. Then notice that too. Arjun's breath slowed again. He watched Krishna's thumb move slightly against his skin. That's it. You're still breathing, Krishna said. His voice stayed quiet. Notice that. Arjun blinked. His ribs expanded and contracted without him thinking about it. I didn't realize I'd stopped. You didn't. Krishna's thumb stilled. You just forgot to notice. Arjun exhaled through his nose. His fingers twitched against his thighs again, lighter this time. It keeps happening. Krishna's thumb moved slightly against his wrist. What does? The forgetting. Arjun swallowed. His shoulders rose and fell with his breath. Even when I try to remember. Krishna didn't move his hand. Then try forgetting. Arjun's fingers stilled. He looked at Krishna's face. What if I can't do that either? Krishna's thumb moved again, just enough to press lightly against Arjun's pulse. Then you're still trying. Arjun swallowed. His breath hitched once before settling. That's not good enough. Krishna didn't move. His fingers stayed where they were. It is right now. Arjun exhaled slowly. His shoulders dropped another fraction. I don't know how to stop trying. Krishna's fingers stayed on his wrist. His thumb didn't move. Then try that. Arjun blinked. His fingers twitched against his thigh again. Try not trying. Krishna nodded once. His thumb pressed slightly against Arjun's pulse. Just for now. Arjun exhaled slowly. His fingers relaxed against his thighs. What happens if I can't? Krishna's fingers didn't move. Then you're still trying. Arjun swallowed. His shoulders stayed loose, but his fingers twitched again. That's all. Krishna's thumb pressed slightly harder against his wrist. That's all. Arjun exhaled through his nose. The sound of distant shouts reached them again, closer now, but still muffled. His fingers didn't move this time. Krishna watched his face. His fingers didn't shift from Arjun's pulse point. Notice that. Arjun blinked. His shoulders rose and fell once with his breath. Notice what? Krishna's thumb didn't move. That you didn't react to the noise this time. Arjun swallowed. His fingers stayed limp against his thighs. I didn't. Krishna shook his head once. His fingers stayed on Arjun's wrist. You heard it. You just didn't grab for your bow. Arjun exhaled slowly. His shoulders stayed loose. I didn't. Krishna's thumb pressed lightly against Arjun's pulse. Notice that. Arjun swallowed. His fingers didn't move this time either. I am. Krishna nodded once. His thumb didn't leave Arjun's wrist. Good. The reins slid further down Arjun's lap, but he didn't reach for them. His breathing stayed even. Krishna watched him for 3 breaths. His fingers stayed in place. Now, what do you notice? Arjun blinked. His shoulders didn't tense. That I'm not asking anything. Krishna's thumb pressed slightly against his wrist. Notice that. Arjun swallowed. His fingers stayed loose against his thighs. I'm not thinking either. Krishna nodded once. His fingers didn't move from Arjun's pulse point. You are, just differently. Arjun exhaled through his nose. His breath didn't hitch this time. It's slower now. Krishna's thumb pressed lightly against his wrist again. Notice that. Arjun swallowed. His fingers stayed loose against his thighs. The reins slipped further, but he didn't reach for them. Krishna watched his face, but didn't speak. His fingers stayed where they were, warm against Arjun's pulse. Arjun blinked. His shoulders stayed relaxed. I'm not trying anymore. Krishna's fingers didn't move from his wrist. Notice that. Arjun exhaled through his nose. His fingers didn't twitch this time. I don't feel like I should be doing something. Krishna's thumb pressed lightly against his pulse. You're not. Arjun swallowed. His breath stayed even. That feels strange. Krishna didn't move his hand. His fingers stayed warm against Arjun's skin. Notice that too. Arjun swallowed. The reins pooled completely in his lap now, forgotten. His fingers didn't reach for them. The distant shouts grew louder, but neither of them turned. Krishna's thumb stayed, pressed lightly against Arjun's wrist. Arjun exhaled slowly. His shoulders stayed loose. The tightness between his ribs eased without him realizing it. Krishna watched his face. His fingers didn't shift. Now notice the silence between the noise. Arjun blinked. The distant shouts faded for a moment, leaving only the creak of the chariot and the horses shifting their weight. Krishna's thumb moved slightly against his wrist. You don't have to listen to it all. Arjun swallowed. His shoulders stayed loose. His fingers didn't twitch toward the reins. Krishna watched his face, but didn't speak. His thumb stayed against Arjun's pulse point. The horses shifted again. One of them snorted loudly. Neither of them looked at the animal. Arjun exhaled through his nose. His fingers stayed still. I hear them again. Krishna didn't move his hand. His fingers stayed warm against Arjun's wrist. Then notice that too. Arjun swallowed. His shoulders didn't tense this time. The distant shouts blended with the horse's breathing. Krishna's thumb pressed lightly once more. You don't have to decide anything about it. Arjun exhaled through his nose. His fingers stayed loose against his thighs. The reins lay forgotten across his lap. Krishna's thumb stayed pressed against his wrist. He didn't speak. Arjun swallowed. The distant shouts sounded clearer now, but they didn't pull at his attention like before. Krishna watched his face. His fingers didn't move from Arjun's pulse. Now notice what's not changing. Arjun swallowed. His shoulders stayed relaxed. His fingers didn't twitch toward the bow at his side. The horses are still breathing. Krishna's thumb pressed lightly once more. And what else? Arjun exhaled slowly. The reins stayed pooled in his lap. Your hand hasn't moved. Krishna nodded once. His fingers stayed warm against Arjun's wrist. Notice that. Arjun swallowed. The reins stayed where they were. His fingers didn't move. I notice I'm not reaching for them. Krishna's thumb pressed lightly. His fingers didn't shift. Good. Arjun exhaled through his nose. His shoulders stayed loose. The distant shouts didn't pull at him anymore. Krishna's thumb pressed once more against his wrist. His fingers didn't move. Now notice your breath. Arjun swallowed. His ribs expanded without effort. His stomach rose and fell with each inhale. Krishna watched his face, but didn't speak. His fingers stayed warm against Arjun's skin. Arjun blinked. His fingers stayed limp against his thighs. The reins didn't move. Krishna exhaled through his nose. His thumb pressed slightly against Arjun's wrist. Now notice what's not there. Arjun swallowed. His shoulders stayed loose. The tightness between his ribs had vanished without him realizing. Krishna's fingers didn't move. The horses shifted their weight, but neither of them reached for the reins. Arjun exhaled slowly through his nose. The distant shouts still reached them, but they sounded no different than the wind now. Krishna's thumb pressed lightly against his wrist again, just once, then stilled. You don't have to name what's missing. Arjun swallowed. His fingers stayed limp against his thighs. The space between his ribs felt lighter than before. Krishna's fingers didn't shift from his wrist. His thumb rested warm against Arjun's pulse, steady now, no longer skipping. The horses stamped once more, but the sound barely registered. Arjun exhaled, watching his own breath cloud briefly in the morning air before dissipating. Somewhere beyond the chariot, a single leaf skittered across the packed earth, catching briefly on a loose pebble before continuing its path unnoticed. Krishna's fingers remained not gripping, not guiding, just present, like sunlight resting on skin after winter. The warmth seeped into Arjun's wrist without demand, without expectation. Arjun noticed the reins had slipped entirely from his lap, pooling at his feet where they'd fallen without sound. He didn't reach for them. The space where panic had coiled between his ribs now held only the quiet rhythm of his own breath. Krishna tilted his chin slightly, watching the way Arjun's shoulders settled into stillness, not rigid, not braced, just existing, like a bowstring at rest between battles. The distant shouts had lost their sharp edges now, blending into the ambient rustle of wind through banners and the soft creak of leather harnesses. Arjun blinked once, slowly, noticing how the tension behind his eyelids had dissolved without his awareness. Krishna's thumb moved not away, but sideways, just enough to trace the faintest arc along Arjun's pulse point, following the path of a single vein beneath the skin. The touch held no urgency, no instruction, merely the quiet acknowledgement of blood still flowing, breath still rising. A horse snorted nearby, shaking its mane in a spray of dust that caught the morning light. Neither of them turned to look. The reins lay where they'd fallen, fingers of worn leather curling against the chariot floor like sleeping serpents. Arjun exhaled just a breath, nothing more, but the sound carried something new in its wake. Not relief, not resolution, but the quiet absence of whatever had knotted itself beneath his sternum before. His thumb twitched once against his thigh, not in agitation, but in simple acknowledgement of its own existence. Krishna's fingers remained, a slight pressure against skin that no longer trembled. His gaze stayed fixed on Arjun's face, not searching, not waiting, just resting there as naturally as sunlight on water. Around them, the battlefield waited without expectation, holding its breath in the space between one moment and the next. Somewhere beyond the chariot, a single leaf, detached from its branch by some unseen hand, drifted sideways in an errant breeze before settling atop a discarded shield. Neither warrior noticed its descent. The world moved around them, indifferent to the quiet revolution occurring in the space between two pairs of stilled hands. Krishna's fingers loosened slightly, not withdrawing, but softening his thumb, now barely grazing the ridge of Arjun's wristbone. The contact felt less like an anchor now, and more like the brush of wind against skin. Present, but no longer pressing. Arjun's pulse had slowed to match the cadence of Krishna's own breathing, neither leading nor following, simply existing in unspoken syncopation. Distant metal clashed again, but the sound fractured differently in Arjun's ears, now not as threat or summons, but as mere vibration traveling through air. He noticed the way the noise dissolved against his eardrums without clinging, like raindrops sliding off oiled leather. His fingers remained limp against his thighs, the calluses along his bow hand no longer itching for the familiar grip. Krishna exhaled, barely audible, and the warmth of it mingled with the morning air between them. His fingers didn't lift away, but neither did they insist. They simply were a point of contact, neither demanding nor retreating, as natural as bark against tree, as unremarkable as shadow touching ground. Somewhere behind them, a soldier coughed again, but the sound carried no weight now, just another note in the symphony of an ordinary dawn. Arjun's eyelids lowered halfway, not in weariness, but in the slow recognition of his own stillness. The reins at his feet might as well have been roots grown through the chariot floor, for how little they called to him. His breath moved in and out without his attention, not controlled, not surrendered, just existing, like the distant cry of a hawk circling beyond the dust clouds. The horses stamped again, their hooves kicking up tiny eddies of earth that sparkled briefly before settling. One snorted directly into Arjun's ear, its hot breath stirring the hairs at his temple. He didn't flinch. The sensation registered, warm, damp, alive, but demanded no reaction. Krishna's thumb shifted again, just enough to follow the natural curve of Arjun's wrist bone, tracing the topography of tendon and vein without agenda. Beyond them, the battlefield remained, arrows still nocked, swords still sheathed, but the space between their chariot and the waiting armies no longer felt like a chasm. It was simply ground, packed earth studded with pebbles, and the occasional stubborn weed pushing through cracks in the dry soil. A single ladybug landed on the chariot rail near Krishna's elbow, its red wings folding neatly beneath spotted black armor. Neither man acknowledged it, yet neither disturbed its path as it began a meandering journey across the sun-warmed wood. Krishna's fingers remained neither tightening nor withdrawing, like roots grown around a river stone. The warmth radiating from his palm had settled into Arjun's skin so thoroughly it no longer registered as separate from his own pulse. Somewhere to their left, a water skin sloshed against the side of the chariot, forgotten since dawn. The sound carried differently now, not an interruption, but another thread in the quiet tapestry of their stillness. Arjun noticed his toes had uncurled inside his sandals without his awareness, the tension draining from them like water through cupped hands. The muscles along his jaw, clenched tight for so long he'd forgotten their existence, now rested smooth against bone. Krishna exhaled softly, watching as a dust mote caught in the sunlight between them, spinning lazily in the space where Arjun's breath had once been jagged. The ladybug reached the end of the rail and paused, antennae twitching as it surveyed the drop to the chariot floor. The distant clatter of armor sounded again, but the noise no longer carried urgency, just the ordinary symphony of men adjusting straps and shifting weight from foot to foot. Krishna's thumb moved once more, not guiding, not pressing, simply acknowledging the steady rhythm beneath skin that no longer trembled. Arjun's fingers twitched again, but differently now, not toward toward weapons or reins, but upward just an inch, brushing the inside of Krishna's wrist in unconscious reciprocity. The contact lasted less than a heartbeat before stilling, yet carried more meaning than any speech they'd exchanged since dawn. Somewhere beyond them, a single cloud passed across the sun, casting their joined hands into brief shadow before moving on. The horses snorted in unison, their ears flicking toward some sound too distant for human ears. Arjun noticed how their breath fogged the morning air in perfect synchrony, in, out, like twin bellows stoking the same fire. Krishna's fingers shifted minutely against his wrist, not withdrawing, but altering their angle just enough to catch a stray sunbeam between knuckles. Warmth pooled there briefly before spilling over onto Arjun's skin. A single leaf, detached from some distant tree, danced across the empty space between chariot and battlefield before catching momentarily on Arjun's discarded reins. The dried edges fluttered once, twice, then stilled as if content with its chosen resting place. Neither man looked down at it. Krishna exhaled just a breath, and Arjun realized his own lungs had matched the cadence without thought, their ribs expanding and contracting in silent unison beneath layers of cloth and armor. The ladybug completed its journey across the chariot rail, pausing at the edge near Krishna's elbow. Its wings flickered once, not taking flight, merely testing, before settling again, as if deciding this warmth was preferable to wherever else it might wander. Arjun's fingers twitched once more against Krishna's wrist, not withdrawing, but shifting slightly to trace the faint ridge of a vein with the same absent curiosity one might follow the path of a wandering ant across stone. Somewhere beyond them, a soldier laughed, a bright, unexpected sound that carried none of war's weight, and Arjun noticed how the muscles around his own mouth softened in response without forming a smile. The sound dissolved into the morning air like salt in water, leaving no trace behind. Krishna's thumb moved once more, just enough to press lightly against Arjun's pulse point, and for the first time since dawn, the touch felt less like instruction and more like simple acknowledgement. Here we are. The horses shifted again, their harnesses creaking with the movement, but neither animal strained against its traces. One lowered its head to nibble at a stubborn weed growing between chariot wheel and packed earth, the crunch of dry vegetation oddly loud in the stillness. Arjun blinked slowly, noticing how his eyelashes cast twin shadows across his cheekbones, brief, fleeting patterns that vanished each time his lids lifted again to meet Krishna's steady gaze. Neither spoke. The reins remained where they'd fallen, their leather fingers curled loosely around nothing at all. Krishna's fingers loosened further still, not withdrawing, but softening like wax warmed by sunlight, until his thumb rested against Arjun's pulse point with only the weight of a fallen leaf. Around them, the battlefield noises continued, metal on metal, shouts muffled by distance, but they registered differently now, like rain heard through thick glass. Arjun's breath moved through him without conscious thought, his ribs expanding and contracting as naturally as tide water lapping against undisturbed sand. The ladybug lifted its wings once more, not to fly, but simply to adjust before settling again along the sun-warmed rail. A breeze stirred the banners behind them, making the embroidered silk ripple like water without disturbing the stillness between chariot wheels. Arjun's fingers twitched once more against Krishna's wrist, not to pull away, but to mirror the absent tracing of veins and tendons with his own calloused fingertips. Somewhere beyond the chariot, a single feather drifted down from some unseen bird's wing, spinning lazily in the space between armies before catching briefly on Arjun's discarded bowstring. Neither man turned to watch its descent. The horses sighed in unison, their warm breath fogging the morning air in perfect synchronicity in, out, as if sharing one set of lungs between them. Krishna's thumb moved again, just enough to press lightly against Arjun's pulse point. But this time, Arjun's fingers answered the touch instinctively, curling slightly around the heel of Krishna's palm without urgency or demand. Somewhere to their left, a single dewdrop slid down a spider's web stretched between chariot rail and shield, catching the sunlight for one brilliant moment before falling soundlessly to the earth below. A soldier coughed in the distance, a dry, rattling sound that carried further than it should have. Yet neither Krishna nor Arjun reacted to the noise. The ladybug began its slow journey back across the rail, its tiny feet tapping against the wood with minute precision. Arjun's thumb brushed once more along the ridge of Krishna's wristbone, following the path of a prominent vein with the same absent curiosity one might trace the course of a wandering stream across smooth stone. The feather still clung to Arjun's bowstring, its veins trembling faintly in the morning breeze, like the last leaf clinging to a winter branch. Somewhere beyond the chariot, a water skin sloshed against its straps, not from being moved, but from the natural shifting of liquid within its confines. Krishna's fingers remained loosely curled around Arjun's wrist, their warmth having seeped so thoroughly into skin and sinew that neither could recall where one touch ended and the other began. The horses stood motionless now, their ears flicking occasionally at passing insects, but otherwise undisturbed by the distant clamor of preparing armies. A single dewdrop balanced precariously on the edge of the chariot's rail, its surface trembling with each shared breath between them. The ladybug reached the midpoint of its return journey, pausing to clean its antennae with fastidious care. Krishna exhaled slowly through his nose, not a sigh, just the natural release of air from lungs that no longer needed to hold anything back. Arjun's fingers remained where they were, loosely cradling the heel of Krishna's palm without pressure or expectation. The feather finally slipped free from the bowstring, drifting sideways in an errant draft before catching momentarily on the fringe of Arjun's discarded quiver. Somewhere behind them, a banner snapped sharply in the wind before falling still again. Krishna's thumb moved once more, just enough to press lightly against Arjun's pulse point, not to check its rhythm, but simply to acknowledge its steady presence. The dewdrop finally lost its battle with gravity, falling silently to the earth below, where it disappeared into the dry soil without trace. Arjun's fingers twitched again against Krishna's wrist, not pulling away, merely adjusting as naturally as tree roots shift to accommodate the slow passage of a buried stone. The horses stood hipshot now, one resting a hind leg with the quiet ease of creatures who have forgotten they were ever meant to run. Somewhere beyond them, a single sparrow alighted on the tip of a discarded spear, its tiny claws making no sound against the polished metal. Krishna exhaled softly, watching the way Arjun's eyelashes fluttered once, not in distress, but simply in response to a passing breeze that carried the scent of distant campfires and trampled grass. The ladybug completed its journey back across the rail, pausing at the edge nearest Krishna's elbow, as if considering whether to venture onto skin warmed by shared stillness. Arjun's thumb traced another slow arc along the ridge of Krishna's wristbone, following the path of a vein with the same unthinking certainty as water finding its way downhill. The feather finally slipped free from the quiver's fringe, drifting sideways before catching briefly on the curve of Arjun's discarded sandal. Neither man looked down at it. The horses' tails swished lazily at non-existent flies, their movements synchronized like pendulums on some unseen clock. Krishna's fingers remained where they were, not gripping, not guiding, simply existing in the same way sunlight continues to fall, whether noticed or not. Somewhere beyond the chariot, a soldier cleared his throat, a sound that carried no more weight than the scratch of a dry leaf against stone, and dissolved back into the morning's quiet hum. Arjun blinked slowly, noticing how the tension behind his eyes had dissolved like salt in warm broth. Krishna's thumb pressed once more against his pulse, just enough to feel the steady rhythm beneath, before stilling again with the quiet certainty of a door closing on a well-worn hinge. The ladybug finally ventured onto Krishna's forearm, its tiny feet tickling across skin with all the weight of a dandelion seed drifting on the wind. Somewhere above them, a single cloud passed across the sun, its shadow sliding over their joined hands like a benediction, before moving on without demand or expectation. The reins lay where they'd fallen, their coiled shapes no longer resembling waiting serpents, but simply lengths of weathered leather at rest. The horses snorted softly, their breath fogging the morning air in unison, as if sharing the same dream. Krishna's fingers shifted, not withdrawing, but turning slightly, until his palm faced upward beneath Arjun's wrist in silent offering. A stray breeze stirred the loose hairs at Arjun's temple, carrying with it the faintest hint of crushed mint from some distant patch of greenery, surviving stubbornly between chariot wheels. The ladybug paused midway along Krishna's forearm, its wings flickering once, not in alarm, but in simple acknowledgement of the warmth beneath its feet, before continuing its meandering path. Somewhere beyond them, a soldier dropped a water skin, the dull thump of it hitting earth, no louder than a ripe fruit falling from a branch. Arjun's fingers twitched again, not toward weapons or reins, but to trace the calluses along Krishna's palm with the same absent curiosity one might explore the grooves of a well-used tool. The horses sighed in perfect harmony, their eyelids drooping as if the morning's tension had never existed. A single dewdrop trembled on the tip of a nearby spear, catching the sunlight for one brilliant moment before falling soundlessly to the earth below. The ladybug reached Krishna's elbow, pausing to clean its antennae again, as if savoring the quiet between movements. Somewhere behind them, a banner flapped lazily in the breeze, its fabric snapping once before settling into the same rhythm as their shared breath. The feather finally slipped free from Arjun's sandal, drifting sideways to land atop his discarded bow like a blessing too light to be felt. Krishna's thumb moved once more, just enough to press lightly against Arjun's pulse point, not checking its rhythm, but simply acknowledging its quiet constancy. The horses stood motionless now, their tails stilled mid-sway, as if frozen in some unseen artist's sketch. The ladybug lifted its wings, not to fly, but simply to adjust their position before settling again against Krishna's skin with the contentment of a traveler who has found temporary shelter. Somewhere beyond them all, the battlefield waited, not patiently, not impatiently, simply existing in the same way shadows continue their slow march across stone regardless of who notices their passing. Arjun's fingers twitched again against Krishna's palm, not withdrawing, merely shifting, their calloused surfaces brushing against each other like two leaves touching in a slow wind. The horses' ears flicked simultaneously at some distant sound too faint for human ears, their nostrils flaring briefly before stilling again. The ladybug began cleaning its forelegs with meticulous care, its tiny movements mirroring the absent way Arjun's thumb traced the lines of Krishna's lifeline. A single dewdrop formed at the tip of a nearby blade of grass, trembling momentarily before falling soundlessly onto the toe of Arjun's sandal. Somewhere behind them, a banner sighed against its pole, not snapping, just settling, its embroidered edges whispering secrets to the morning air. Krishna exhaled softly through his nose, not a sigh, just the natural release of breath from lungs that no longer needed to hold anything back. The feather on Arjun's bow shifted slightly in the breeze, its veins trembling like the last note of a song, hovering between singer and silence. The ladybug completed its grooming and resumed its journey, moving toward the crook of Krishna's elbow with the unhurried certainty of a pilgrim who knows the path by heart. Arjun's fingers remained where they were, not gripping, not guiding, simply resting against Krishna's palm with the same quiet inevitability as moonlight resting on still water. Somewhere beyond the chariot, a single sparrow alighted on the hilt of a discarded sword, its tiny claws making no sound against the worn leather wrapping. The horses blinked in unison, their long lashes sweeping downward like curtains closing on some unseen performance. Krishna's thumb brushed once more against Arjun's pulse, not to measure its cadence, but simply to acknowledge its continued presence, before stilling again with the quiet finality of a door closing on well-oiled hinges. The ladybug paused at the fold of Krishna's elbow, its antennae twitching as it considered some invisible landmark known only to itself. Arjun's fingers twitched again, not away, but deeper, their rough pads settling into the grooves of Krishna's palm, as naturally as pebbles finding their places in a stream bed. Somewhere above them all, the sun continued its slow ascent, unhurried, undemanding, casting their joined hands into alternating light and shadow as clouds passed overhead like thoughts across a quiet mind. The ladybug completed its journey up Krishna's arm, pausing near the crook of his elbow where skin met fabric. Its wings flickered once, not in preparation for flight, but simply to realign themselves before settling again with the quiet satisfaction of a traveler adjusting their cloak against familiar terrain. Arjun's thumb moved absently along the curve of Krishna's wrist bone, following the path of a prominent vein with the same unthinking precision as water finding the quickest path downhill. The horses sighed in perfect unison, their warm breath fogging the morning air in synchronized plumes, as if sharing one set of lungs between them. Somewhere beyond the chariot, a single leaf broke free from a distant tree branch, spinning lazily through shafts of sunlight before landing atop Arjun's discarded quiver without sound or ceremony. Krishna exhaled softly through his nose, not a sigh, merely the natural release of breath, as Arjun's fingers curled slightly around his palm without pressure or urgency. The ladybug continued its slow progress along Krishna's arm, its tiny feet tapping against skin with all the weight of raindrops landing on broad leaves. The feather on Arjun's bow shifted again, not falling, just adjusting, its veins trembling like the last vibration of a plucked harp string fading into silence. Somewhere behind them, a banner flapped once against its pole, not sharply, just settling, the embroidered edges whispering secrets to the morning air before falling still again. The horses stood motionless now, their ears twitching occasionally at passing insects, but otherwise undisturbed by the distant preparations of armies. Krishna's fingers remained loosely curled around Arjun's wrist, not holding, not guiding, simply existing in the same way sunlight continues to fall, whether noticed or not. The ladybug reached Krishna's shoulder, pausing to clean its antennae again with fastidious care, as if savoring the quiet between movements. Arjun's thumb traced another slow arc along the lines of Krishna's palm, not reading fate, simply following contours, with the same absent curiosity as wind exploring the curves of a riverbank. Somewhere beyond them all, the battlefield waited, not with anticipation, not with impatience, simply existing in the way shadows continue their slow march across stone regardless of who notices their passing.